In today's video, I want to address a common question I receive from my viewers. Do these gambits and opening traps really work in real-life games? I appreciate all the positive feedback and the support from all of you. In order to demonstrate the effectiveness of these tactics, I have prepared my top 3 quickest wins using the same opening traps that I have taught you. These wins are not just theoretical, but actual games where these strategies have been successfully employed. So, in this video, you will witness real-life examples of how these gambits and traps can lead to swift victories. If you find this content valuable, I kindly ask you to hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. Now, let's dive into the exciting world of these opening traps and see them in action. Let's jump right into this game, where I had the opportunity to play against a strong 2,500 rated chess player. As white, I opened with the move e4, and my opponent responded with the popular Sicilian defense, playing c5. Being familiar with this defense, I opted for a different approach and played knight f3. My opponent continued with e6, and I knew I had to be careful. Instead of my usual move g4, I decided to try out a little gambit against this formidable opponent. I played c3, which is not the most common move in the latest database. My opponent took the pawn on e4, attacking my knight and my pawn. However, I countered with knight g5, putting pressure on the e4 pawn. It's important to note that my knight on g5 is well protected by my dark-squared bishop, so it cannot be captured. My opponent played knight f6, and I continued with bishop e3. Bishop e3 may seem like a simple move, but it sets up a long-term trap. My opponent took on d3, and I recaptured with my light-squared bishop. Now, my opponent made a critical blunder by playing knight h6, which ultimately led to their defeat. I sacrificed my knight on f7, double attacking their queen on d8 and the rook on h8. In this position, my opponent resigned. Had my opponent captured the knight, I would have played bishop g6 check, covering the e8 square. If the king had taken my bishop, I would have won my opponent's queen. Even if black played king e7 instead of capturing, the purpose of playing bishop e3 earlier becomes evident. I could have played bishop takes c5 check, and after queen d6, I would have taken their queen, leading to a checkmate. To learn more about this opening trick, you can watch the linked video above. Feel free to check out the featured videos in the comment section below as well. Now let's move on to my next game, which was against a 2,160 rated chess player. This was another 3-minute blitz match, and the game concluded in just 9 moves. I opened with e4 as white, and my opponent responded with pawn to c5, once again opting for the Sicilian defense. I played c3, just as I did in the previous game. However, this time my opponent immediately played pawn to d5, preventing me from playing pawn to d3 to transpose into the previous line. To bring the game back into the previous line, I played knight f3, allowing black to capture on e4 and attack my knight. I countered with knight g5, putting pressure on the e4 pawn. I anticipated that my opponent would play knight to f6 to defend the pawn, and I was ready to play pawn to d3. As you can see, we have now transposed back to the position we had on move 5 in the first game. After pawn to d3, my opponent captured the pawn, and I happily recaptured on d3. Then, my 2,160 rated opponent made a hasty move with pawn to h6, which turned out to be a blunder. You already know the move, knight takes f7 sacrifice, double attacking the queen and the rook on h8. However, this time my opponent didn't resign and chose not to capture my knight. Instead, they played queen to d5, counterattacking my knight and also threatening my undefended g2 pawn. Undeterred, I went ahead and took the rook, and after my opponent played queen takes g2, I played bishop g6 check. At this point, my opponent resigned. The reason being, their queen is about to be lost anyway. My queen is covering the d-file, and the bishop is covering the diagonal. The only move black can play is queen takes g6, but this doesn't help much as on the next move, I will capture the dark-squared bishop and activate my queen. So that's why my opponent resigned in this game as well. Let's move on to game number 3, another 3-minute blitz match. I was playing against a 2,330 rated opponent. I started with e4, and my opponent responded with d5, opting for the Scandinavian defense. I have no problem facing the Scandinavian defense because I can always play the Tennyson Gambit, especially against players at the 2,300 level. Alternatively, I can simply capture on d5, and after queen takes, I like playing knight c3. Most often, they play queen f5, which is the main line of the Scandinavian defense. To quickly finish the game, I played pawn to b4, sacrificing my pawn for no apparent reason. My opponent captured the pawn, and you might think the idea was to play rook to b1, but no. I actually wanted to play knight b5. This is known as the Leonard Gambit. Noticing that I wanted to capture on c7 with check and win the rook on a8, my opponent played queen f5, defending the c7 pawn and securing their queen. However, I played bishop c4, and even in the latest database, pawn to c6 is the top move played, which is what my opponent played in this position. I couldn't believe it. A 2,330 rated opponent fell for this trap. The move in this position, my friends, is bishop takes f7 check. My opponent captured the bishop, and then I played queen e5 check. Now, there's a problem. If my opponent played pawn to g6, I would simply play knight d6 check, and end up winning the black queen on a5. Even king e6 would lead to a similar trap on move number 9. So my opponent played king f6, knowing that I didn't have any checks or discovered attacks this time. I played bishop b5 check because that was the available move. My opponent played e5, and then I recaptured with my bishop, delivering another check. That was the right continuation. My opponent played king e7, and I knew I was winning after knight c7 because I was confident that my opponent wouldn't see my next move, checkmate. Firstly, my knight is defended by my bishop, and it seems like I'm only attacking the rook, and perhaps my intention is to give a check and win the black queen on a5. However, all of this wasn't my idea. My opponent played queen f4, attempting to somehow save the queen, but it couldn't save the game. Let me know in the comment section below if you want me to do the second episode or the second part of this video. Feel free to write your thoughts, and I'll respond accordingly. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and peace.